For as long as humans have been able to think about death, we have wondered what awareness remains after the body stops working. Not whether something continues, but whether that something knows it has crossed a boundary. Does consciousness recognize its own ending, or does it simply keep going without realizing the rules have changed? Tonight, we're not approaching this from belief or comfort, but from observation, psychology, neuroscience, historical accounts, and the strange consistencies that appear across cultures that never spoke to one another. We are exploring a single question: when the body is gone, is awareness still capable of knowing that fact? To understand this, we first have to be clear about what knowing even means. In daily life, awareness is tied tightly to sensory feedback. You know you're alive because your lungs move, your eyes see, your heart responds to effort. But even now, much of what you consider yourself happens without constant reference to the body. When you're absorbed in thought, dreaming, remembering, or imagining, the body fades into the background. The sense of I am continues even when physical input is reduced. This is important because death may not be a sudden collapse into nothing, but a continuation of awareness under radically altered conditions. Medical science has documented thousands of cases where the brain enters extreme shutdown states, while subjective awareness persists. People revived from cardiac arrest often describe vivid experiences during periods when brain activity was minimal or flat. Some describe confusion rather than revelation. Others describe a strange neutrality, as if they were present but not yet informed. This detail matters. If awareness instantly knew it was dead, we would expect certainty. Instead, many reports describe a delay, a moment where something continues but does not yet have a label for what has happened. Psychologically, this mirrors how the mind handles sudden trauma. When something catastrophic occurs, awareness often fragments. People in accidents sometimes report watching events unfold without emotional reaction, only realizing later what happened. The system continues operating while comprehension lags behind reality. Death, if experienced subjectively, may follow a similar pattern. Awareness may persist before it understands the loss of the body. Across cultures, stories of wandering spirits, confused ancestors, or lingering presences share a common theme. Not torment, but disorientation. Ancient Chinese texts describe the Hun and Po, aspects of consciousness that separate at death, with one remaining near the physical world, unaware that life has ended. Tibetan teachings speak of the bardo, a state where awareness continues, but must be shown that the body is gone. In medieval Europe, ghost stories often portrayed the dead repeating routines, walking familiar paths, or attempting daily tasks. These stories weren't originally meant as horror. They were explanations for what happens when awareness outlasts the body but not the identity attached to it. Modern psychology offers a lens for this. Identity is constructed from memory, habit, and expectation. If awareness continues without a body, those structures don't automatically dissolve. The sense of being someone who wakes up, moves, speaks, and occupies space may persist briefly even when none of those actions are possible. Awareness may still feel embodied until it tries to interact with something physical and fails. That failure may be the first clue. Some near-death experiencers report this exact moment. They describe trying to speak and realizing no sound comes out, trying to touch someone and passing through them. The shock isn't fear, but confusion. The realization doesn't arrive as a thought like I am dead, but as a question. Why doesn't this work anymore? Awareness often learns through contrast. The absence of feedback becomes information. Neurologically, the brain is a prediction machine. It constantly anticipates sensory input based on past patterns. If awareness can persist even briefly beyond biological function, it may continue predicting a body that no longer responds. When those predictions fail repeatedly, awareness is forced to update its model of reality. This updating process may be what some interpret as realizing death, but not all awareness may update at the same speed. This could explain reports of lingering presences or repeated patterns. If consciousness is not a single point but a layered system, some layers may let go faster than others. Memory may persist longer than sensation. Emotion may outlast logic. Habit may remain after intention dissolves. Awareness might not be a clean switch, but a gradual shedding of functions. Children who report past life memories often describe confusion rather than enlightenment. They say things like, "I used to be big," or "I died, but I didn't know what happened." These accounts frequently include a period of floating, waiting, or watching without understanding. Skeptics point to imagination, but the consistency of the emotional tone is notable. There is rarely a dramatic declaration of death. Instead, there is often a sense of being somewhere unfamiliar without knowing why. Even in hospice care, there are moments that suggest awareness may transition unevenly. Some dying patients speak to unseen figures or ask questions that imply partial understanding. They may say things like, "Am I supposed to be here?" or "Did I already go?" These are not philosophical statements. They are situational questions, as if awareness is checking its location. If awareness instantly knew it was dead, there would be no reason for these questions. The presence of uncertainty suggests a process rather than an event, a shift rather than a collapse. One of the most unsettling ideas is that awareness might not automatically receive a notification that the body has ended. There may be no internal announcement, no universal signal. Instead, awareness may infer death through absence. No heartbeat felt, no breath needed, no hunger arriving. At first, this might feel like peace or numbness. Only later does it become strange. Consider how often in life you fail to notice gradual changes until something forces your attention. You don't notice aging day to day. You don't notice the exact moment a sound stops being background noise and becomes silence. Awareness is not always observant. It assumes continuity until contradicted. This may also explain why so many traditions emphasize guidance after death. Rituals, prayers, and instructions for the dead appear worldwide. These weren't only meant to comfort the living, they were meant to inform awareness that something had changed. In some cultures, the dead are spoken to directly, told that their body is gone and that they should move on. This implies an expectation that awareness might not know on its own. From a scientific perspective, we can't confirm what happens after biological death, but we can study how awareness behaves when sensory input is removed, when identity is destabilized, when prediction systems fail. In sensory deprivation experiments, people report losing track of their body, time, and even self-boundaries. Awareness persists, but it becomes fluid, dreamlike, and uncertain. Death may resemble an extreme version of this state. If that's the case, then the question isn't whether the dead are aware they are dead, but when awareness catches up to reality, and whether it always does. Some philosophies suggest that awareness doesn't need to know it's dead, because death is only meaningful to a body. Once bodily reference points disappear, the concept itself may dissolve. There may be awareness without categorization, presence without narrative, being without story. But human identity is deeply story-based. We define ourselves by past and future. Without a body, time may behave differently. Without time, realization may not arrive in a familiar way. Awareness may not think, "I was alive and now I am dead." It may simply experience a shift in clarity, density, or direction. The unsettling possibility is that some awareness remains anchored to identity longer than others. Not because it is punished or trapped, but because it hasn't let go of the model it used to understand reality. Just as dreams feel real until you wake up, existence after death may feel continuous until awareness recognizes the rules have changed. And that recognition may not be instant. This raises another question that quietly follows behind the first. If awareness doesn't immediately know it's dead, what does it think is happening instead? When awareness doesn't immediately register that the body has ended, it still tries to explain its experience using familiar rules. Consciousness is not comfortable with ambiguity. It searches for cause, context, and continuity. If breathing, pain, hunger, and effort are suddenly gone, awareness doesn't jump to the conclusion of death. It looks for simpler explanations first: rest, sleep, detachment, dreaming, even illness. In life, there are many states where the body fades temporarily. Death may initially feel like one of these, not an absolute boundary. This is why so many reported experiences describe an assumption of sleep. People revived from near-death states often say they believed they were unconscious or dreaming, even while observing events accurately. Awareness doesn't immediately label itself as disembodied. It simply continues observing, waiting for sensation to return. The absence of discomfort is not alarming. In fact, it may feel like relief. The body was always noisy. Its silence doesn't instantly feel wrong. From a cognitive standpoint, awareness operates on prediction and correction. It predicts sensory input based on memory. When predictions fail, it updates slowly unless the error is extreme. But death removes input entirely. There is no pain spike, no alarm signal, no internal red flag that says something catastrophic has happened. Instead, there is a quiet reduction. Signals fade rather than explode. This kind of change is harder to interpret. Imagine suddenly losing gravity without warning. At first, you might think you're falling, then floating, then dreaming. Only after repeated attempts to orient yourself would you realize the rules are different. Awareness after death may go through a similar phase of testing. Trying to move, trying to speak, trying to feel weight or resistance. Each failed attempt provides information, but not an explanation. This testing behavior appears frequently in anecdotal accounts. Awareness tries to interact with the environment and becomes confused when nothing responds. The confusion is not existential at first, it's practical. Why can't I pick this up? Why doesn't anyone hear me? Why am I here but not here? These are functional questions, not metaphysical ones. Awareness is troubleshooting. Psychology tells us that identity persists until contradicted. You don't stop feeling like yourself just because circumstances change. If awareness continues, it likely continues as the last known version of itself. That version expects certain feedback loops. When those loops break, awareness doesn't immediately abandon identity. It tries to repair it. This could explain why many traditions describe the newly dead as lingering near familiar places. Awareness gravitates toward the known. Home, loved ones, routine environments. These are not chosen out of attachment alone, but because they are reference points. Awareness checks them for consistency. If this is sleep, waking should happen here. If this is illness, recovery should occur near the familiar. But recovery never comes. The realization of death, when it occurs, may not arrive as fear or panic. Many accounts describe it as a quiet understanding, almost neutral. Awareness notices that time behaves differently. There is no fatigue, no hunger, no urge to breathe. There may be emotion, but it is not tied to bodily sensation. This decoupling is subtle but profound. Emotion exists without physical echo. That alone suggests a change. Some people report a moment of clarity where they understand they are no longer alive, but not as a tragedy. It's more like understanding a rule. Gravity no longer applies. The rule has changed. Once this understanding arrives, behavior changes. Awareness stops trying to interact physically. It begins to observe differently. Attention shifts inward or outward in new ways. But this moment may not be universal. Not all awareness updates cleanly. Just as some people struggle to accept change in life, awareness may resist updating its model of reality. Resistance doesn't require fear. It can be as simple as expectation. If you expect to wake up, you keep waiting. If you expect sensation to return, you keep checking. This idea is reflected in old accounts of echoes and repetitions. Awareness repeating actions it once performed. Walking paths, standing in familiar places. These aren't punishments. They are loops created by expectation. The mind is extremely good at looping when feedback is missing. Dreams do this constantly. Scenes repeat until the dream ends or shifts. The boundary between dream and post-death awareness may be thinner than we assume. Both involve awareness operating without full sensory input. Both involve narrative construction based on memory. Both can feel real while lacking physical consistency. The key difference may be stability. Dreams are unstable. Post-death awareness, if it exists, may be more coherent. Another important factor is time perception. Time is regulated by bodily processes: heartbeats, circadian rhythms, hormonal cycles. Remove the body, and time may no longer flow in the same way. Awareness might not experience duration as we do. Moments could stretch or compress. Waiting may not feel like waiting. Confusion could persist without urgency. If awareness doesn't experience time normally, then realization may not be delayed in the way we imagine. It may simply occur without a sense of how long it took. From the outside, it looks like lingering. From the inside, it may feel immediate. There's also the question of individuality. Is awareness the same as personality? Or does personality rely on the brain while awareness is more fundamental? If personality fades faster than awareness, then the realization of death may not matter. There may be awareness without identity. In that state, there is no one to ask, "Am I dead?" There is only experience. However, many accounts suggest that identity persists, at least briefly. Memories, preferences, and emotional bonds appear intact. Awareness recognizes people, places, and relationships. This suggests that the realization of death must be processed by an identity that still exists. Children's spontaneous past life memories often include statements about not understanding what happened. They don't describe knowing they died. They describe being somewhere else, or watching their family, or waiting. The realization, if it came, seems secondary. What mattered was continuity of awareness, not classification of state. Even in modern clinical settings, people revived after long cardiac arrest sometimes express surprise at being alive again. Not relief, not fear, but confusion. They believed they were still in the same state they had been in. This suggests that awareness doesn't experience death as a dramatic rupture. It experiences it as continuity with altered rules. If awareness assumes continuity, then death is not recognized as death until contradiction becomes undeniable. This contradiction might come from realizing that the body is no longer accessible, or it might come from a shift in perception so radical that identity itself dissolves. Either way, awareness doesn't wake up and say, "I am dead." It drifts into understanding. There is also the possibility that awareness never frames the experience as death at all. Death is a concept that belongs to the living. It is defined by the absence of life functions. If awareness no longer uses those functions as reference points, the concept may lose relevance. Awareness may not need to know it is dead because the distinction no longer applies. But this raises another unsettling idea. If awareness doesn't categorize itself as dead, then what does it think it is? Perhaps it doesn't think in those terms anymore. Perhaps awareness becomes something closer to observation than identity. Less I and more presence. Less narrative, more state. Still, the transitional phase matters. The moment where awareness still expects bodily rules is where confusion arises. This is where most accounts cluster. This is where stories of realization, wandering, or guidance appear. It suggests that the transition is not instantaneous for everyone. Some traditions propose that awareness is shown the body after death, not as punishment, but as instruction, to help it understand that the body is no longer usable. This idea appears in different forms across cultures. It implies that awareness needs evidence. Seeing the body provides closure that sensation alone cannot. From a psychological angle, this makes sense. Humans accept loss more easily when it is concrete. Abstract absence is harder to process. Awareness may need confirmation to release its attachment to physical identity. But even confirmation doesn't guarantee immediate understanding. Grief takes time. Even in life, people struggle to accept loss even when evidence is clear. Awareness may grieve the body the way the living grieve loved ones. Letting go may be a process, not a switch. This leads to a deeper question. If awareness is capable of confusion, expectation, and gradual understanding after death, then death is not the end of experience. It is a change in the rules of experience. Awareness continues learning, adjusting, and interpreting, which means the most important factor may not be whether awareness knows it is dead, but whether it is able to let go of the need to know at all. When awareness no longer needs to maintain the body, an enormous amount of cognitive energy becomes available. In life, most awareness is occupied with regulation. Breathing, posture, balance, temperature, hunger, pain avoidance, social signaling. Even when you are resting, these systems run constantly in the background. If awareness persists beyond the body, all of that demand vanishes at once. The result is not emptiness, but expansion. Attention has nowhere it must be. It can move freely or not move at all. This shift may be one of the first clues that something fundamental has changed. Awareness notices that effort is no longer required. There is no tension behind thoughts, no urgency driving perception. Even confusion may feel strangely calm. This calmness is often misinterpreted by the living as peace or transcendence, but it may simply be the absence of biological pressure. The body was always pushing. Without it, awareness floats. But floating does not mean understanding. In fact, the lack of pressure may slow realization. In life, urgency forces conclusions. Hunger makes you seek food. Pain makes you seek cause. Without urgency, awareness may observe without resolving. It can remain in a state of passive curiosity for what feels like a long time, even if time itself is no longer structured. This may explain why some accounts describe awareness simply watching, not judging, not intervening, not reacting. Watching people, environments, even thoughts arise and fade. Awareness becomes observational rather than participatory. Without the ability to act physically, action loses meaning. Observation becomes the default. There is a psychological parallel to this. In deep meditation, practitioners report losing the sense of being a doer. Thoughts appear without ownership. Sensations arise without reaction. Identity thins. The sense of me becomes transparent. Death, if experienced subjectively, may induce a similar state naturally. Awareness without agency. Agency is deeply tied to the body. Muscles create intention. Movement confirms existence. When agency disappears, identity weakens. Awareness may still recognize memories, but feel less attached to them. The story of who you were becomes less urgent to maintain. This weakening of identity could be mistaken for enlightenment in some descriptions, but it may simply be a functional consequence of losing bodily feedback. Identity was never just awareness. It was awareness shaped by resistance. Without resistance, form softens. At this stage, awareness may no longer care whether it is dead. The question loses relevance. There is no survival instinct pushing the inquiry. There is no fear of cessation. There is only experience unfolding without demand. But this doesn't mean awareness is blank. Memory may still arise. Emotions may still occur. But they are less sticky. In life, emotion is amplified by bodily sensation. Fear tightens the chest. Joy lifts the stomach. Without those sensations, emotion may exist as information rather than force. Sadness may be known without heaviness. Love may be felt without longing. This could explain why some accounts describe encounters with loved ones that lack the intensity we expect. There is recognition, but not clinging. Connection without need. Awareness recognizes familiarity, but doesn't grasp. Another possibility is that awareness becomes more sensitive to non-physical patterns. Without sensory noise, subtle structures may become apparent. Thought itself may be perceived differently. Instead of being something you have, thought becomes something you observe. This shift is reported both in advanced contemplative states and near-death experiences. Awareness stops identifying with content. If awareness is no longer bound to thought, then realization of death may occur without language. There may be knowing without words, understanding without narrative. The realization is not, I am dead, but this is different. Difference is enough. This is important because language belongs to the living. It evolved to coordinate bodies in shared space. Without bodies, language may lose precision. Awareness may think in impressions, associations, or direct knowing. Asking whether awareness knows it is dead assumes that knowing takes a linguistic form. It may not. There is also the question of continuity. Does awareness feel continuous from life into death, or does it feel like awakening from sleep? Many reports suggest continuity. No blackout, no jump, just a shift. If there is no moment of interruption, then there is no clear boundary to label. Awareness doesn't say, before I was alive, now I am dead. It simply continues. Continuity complicates realization. If nothing stopped, then nothing ended. From awareness's perspective, existence is uninterrupted. Only the rules have changed. This may lead awareness to interpret the change as environmental rather than existential. Something about reality feels different, but awareness itself feels the same. In life, you don't constantly question your existence. You assume it. Awareness may do the same after death. Existence is the default assumption. Non-existence is abstract. Awareness experiences itself, therefore it assumes being. The category of death may never be applied. This idea aligns with certain philosophical traditions that argue awareness cannot experience its own absence. There is no perception of non-being. If awareness persists, it cannot know death as an endpoint, only as a concept remembered from life. The lived experience is still being. This raises a subtle but profound implication. The dead may not experience themselves as dead at all. They may experience themselves as existing under unfamiliar conditions. The label dead may only exist from the perspective of the living. From this perspective, stories of awareness realizing it is dead may actually be stories of awareness realizing it is no longer embodied. The realization is about loss of form, not loss of being. Body absence, not self-absence. And yet, not all awareness may adjust smoothly. Some identities are tightly bound to bodily roles: profession, status, physical capability. If awareness strongly identified with action and control, the loss of agency may feel disorienting. Frustration may arise. Awareness may attempt to reassert control where none is possible. This could create loops of attention, repeated focus on the physical world, repeated attempts to influence outcomes. Not because awareness is trapped, but because it hasn't discovered new modes of interaction. It is still using old tools. Learning new tools requires openness. Awareness must release assumptions about how reality responds. If awareness expects resistance and receives none, it must recalibrate. This recalibration may be gradual. There is also the matter of emotional bonds. Attachment does not instantly dissolve. Concern for loved ones may persist. Awareness may observe without being able to intervene. This could be interpreted as watching over, haunting, or guarding. But from the inside, it may simply be attention drawn by familiarity. Attention follows meaning. Loved ones were meaningful in life. That meaning doesn't vanish immediately. Awareness may orbit what mattered most until meaning itself transforms. Over time, meaning may shift away from specific people or places toward broader patterns. Awareness may begin to notice structures underlying experience rather than individual events. Some describe this as moving toward light, expansion, or unity. These metaphors may describe the same shift. attention moving from form to field. As attention widens, the need to categorize experience diminishes. Death, life, self, other. These distinctions rely on boundaries. Without a body, boundaries soften. Awareness may no longer need to define itself against something else. In that state, asking whether awareness knows it is dead becomes meaningless. There is no contrast to define death against life. There is only experience. However, the transition into this state may not be guaranteed. Just as in life, awareness can cling. It can narrow. It can fixate. Without bodily limitations, fixation may persist without interruption. This could explain persistent identity states described in folklore. But even fixation requires energy. Attention must be held somewhere. If nothing reinforces it, it may eventually dissolve. Without bodily stress hormones, without survival pressure, fixation may lose fuel. Awareness may naturally broaden over time. This suggests that realization is not forced, it unfolds. Awareness doesn't need to be told it is dead. It only needs to explore enough to outgrow the question. As awareness loosens its attachment to the body and the identity built around it, something subtle begins to happen. The sense of location starts to blur. In life, awareness is anchored. It feels behind the eyes, inside the chest, within clear boundaries. This anchoring is maintained by constant sensory feedback. Without it, awareness may no longer feel somewhere in the way it once did. Instead of being inside a body, it may feel like it is within experience itself. This shift can be deeply disorienting at first. Location is one of the primary ways identity stabilizes. You know who you are, partly because you know where you are. When that dissolves, awareness may initially grasp for familiar points of reference: rooms, landscapes, people. Not because they are necessary, but because they are recognizable structures in a reality that suddenly feels unstructured. Many accounts describe awareness appearing in environments that resemble physical places: fields, houses, corridors, even entire cities. These are often dismissed as hallucinations, but they may serve a psychological function. Awareness constructs environments the way the dreaming mind does, using memory to provide continuity. When the external world no longer provides structure, the mind supplies it. This doesn't mean these environments are fake. They may be transitional spaces, interfaces that help awareness adjust. Just as dreams help process waking life, these constructed realities may help awareness process the loss of the body. They give awareness something to stand on while it learns new rules. Importantly, awareness in these states often does not question the environment at first. It accepts it as given. This mirrors how dreams work. You rarely question why you're in a strange place while dreaming. The mind accepts coherence where there is none. Only when inconsistencies accumulate does questioning arise. This suggests that awareness may initially believe it is still in a kind of physical world, even if subtly altered. It may not think, "I am dead," but something about reality feels off. Colors may be sharper or dimmer. Space may feel more fluid. Objects may not behave consistently. These anomalies are clues, but they are not interpreted immediately. In life, we ignore anomalies all the time. We rationalize them. We assume error. Awareness may do the same. It may assume it is confused, tired, or dreaming. Death may not present itself as an obvious explanation. Another important aspect is the persistence of social structures. Awareness may encounter other presences that feel familiar or human-like. Whether these are internal constructs, external consciousnesses, or something else entirely, is less important than their function. They provide interaction. Interaction stabilizes awareness. It prevents dissolution into abstraction too quickly. In many cultural accounts, these presences serve as guides, relatives, or neutral observers. They rarely announce, "You are dead." Instead, they respond to awareness as it is. This implies that realization is not forced. Awareness is allowed to arrive at understanding on its own. From a psychological standpoint, this is consistent with how humans integrate major change. Sudden, overwhelming information is often rejected. Gradual exposure allows assimilation. Awareness may need to experience its new state before it can understand it. There is also the possibility that awareness chooses not to know. In life, denial is a powerful mechanism. It protects identity from collapse. If awareness realizes too quickly that everything it was built around no longer applies, it may destabilize. A transitional phase allows continuity. This raises a provocative idea. Awareness may delay realizing it is dead not because it cannot know, but because it is not ready to know. The system prioritizes stability over truth, at least initially. If this is the case, then the question of awareness is not purely passive. There may be an element of choice, even if unconscious. Awareness may orient toward familiarity until it feels safe enough to let go. This idea appears in accounts where awareness resists moving on, or hesitates at thresholds. Thresholds are symbolic representations of transition. Doors, bridges, rivers. These images appear repeatedly across cultures. They represent moments where awareness must choose to release one mode of being and enter another. Not everyone crosses immediately. Some linger, some return. Some observe from the edge. This doesn't necessarily imply punishment or error. It may simply reflect readiness. From a neurological analogy, consider how the brain transitions between sleep stages. It doesn't jump instantly from waking to deep sleep. It passes through hypnagogic states where imagery, memory, and sensation mix. Death, if experienced, may involve a similar gradient. Awareness passes through liminal states before settling into a new mode. In these liminal states, awareness may still think in human terms. It may still ask human questions. It may still feel curiosity, concern, and recognition. But the emotional charge behind these experiences may be muted. Without bodily amplification, intensity fades. This fading of intensity may be mistaken for detachment, but it may simply be clarity. Emotion without compulsion. Thought without urgency. Awareness can consider ideas without being driven by them. This could allow awareness to revisit memories without attachment. Life events may replay, not as judgment, but as information. Awareness may see patterns it never noticed, how actions affected others, how intentions differed from outcomes. This review is often reported, but it is rarely described as accusatory. It is observational. Importantly, this review does not require awareness to know it is dead. It only requires distance from embodiment. The perspective shift alone changes interpretation. Awareness sees life from outside its previous constraints. This suggests that realization of death is not necessary for growth or integration. Awareness can evolve without labeling its state. The label is secondary to the experience. However, labeling may eventually occur. Awareness may recognize that the body is not returning. That sensory input is not resuming. That interaction with the physical world is no longer possible. This recognition may be quiet and irreversible. Once it occurs, awareness may stop trying to re-engage physically. At this point, awareness may feel a release. Not relief, but alignment. The struggle to make old rules work ends. Attention redirects naturally. Curiosity shifts toward what is accessible rather than what is lost. This redirection may feel like movement, even if there is no space. Movement may be metaphorical, a change in focus rather than location. Awareness tunes into different layers of experience. Some describe this as ascending, expanding, or dissolving. These words attempt to capture a shift in scale. Awareness may feel less localized, more diffuse. Identity may become less defined. The sense of me may soften into a sense of being part of something larger. At this stage, the concept of death may feel irrelevant. Awareness is not concerned with what it was. It is engaged with what it is becoming. Yet the living often project their own fears onto this process. They imagine awareness clinging desperately or suffering confusion. While confusion may occur, suffering requires resistance and fear. Without bodily fear responses, suffering may be less intense than imagined. This doesn't mean the process is uniformly pleasant. Disorientation can still be uncomfortable. Attachment can still pull attention backward, but the emotional landscape is different, less sharp, less urgent. If awareness eventually fully releases bodily identity, then the question of knowing one is dead becomes moot. There is no one left to be dead. There is only awareness experiencing itself in new forms. But this raises one final tension. If awareness dissolves into something broader, does individuality persist at all? And if it doesn't, who was it that didn't know they were dead? This tension sits at the heart of the mystery. Awareness may pass through a phase of individuality before transcending it. The question of knowing death may belong only to that phase. As awareness moves further from bodily identity, the idea of individuality begins to feel less solid. In life, individuality is reinforced constantly. You have a name, a face, a history, a set of roles reflected back to you by others. Without a body, those reinforcements stop. No mirrors, no voices calling your name, no physical evidence insisting that you are a single, separate entity. Awareness may still remember being someone, but remembering and being are not the same thing. This is where a deeper shift can occur. Awareness may notice that it is not confined to a point. In life, even when you imagine expanding, you still feel located somewhere. After the body, awareness may feel spread out, as if it occupies experience rather than sits within it. This is difficult to describe using human language, which assumes location, but many accounts struggle in the same way, using metaphors like becoming space, becoming light, or becoming a field. At this stage, awareness may no longer be concerned with questions of status, achievement, or survival. Those concepts relied on scarcity and time. Without a body, there is no hunger driving accumulation, no aging driving urgency. Awareness may recognize that nothing is at risk. This realization alone can dissolve enormous tension. But letting go of tension does not immediately mean letting go of self. Identity can persist as a pattern even when its original purpose is gone. Just as habits linger after circumstances change, the sense of being someone may continue out of inertia. Awareness may still refer to itself internally, even if that reference grows fainter. This persistence of self patterns may be what allows for continued interaction with other awarenesses. If individuality dissolved instantly, there would be no recognizable encounters. The fact that encounters are reported at all suggests that individuality fades gradually, not abruptly. These encounters often feel telepathic rather than verbal. Communication may occur as shared understanding rather than exchanged words. This makes sense if awareness is no longer constrained by vocal cords or auditory processing. Meaning may be transferred directly without translation into language. In such exchanges, awareness may gain information without being told explicitly. Understanding may arise as a sudden clarity rather than a message. This could include understanding the state it is in, not as you are dead, but as this is no longer physical existence. The distinction is subtle but important. One frames the situation as loss. The other frames it as transformation. Transformation is easier to accept than negation. Awareness may integrate change more smoothly when it is not framed as an ending. This could explain why many descriptions avoid the word death altogether. The experience is described as crossing, shifting, or continuing. If awareness understands itself as transformed rather than ended, then the question of knowing death becomes secondary. Awareness knows change, not cessation. It knows difference, not absence. This also aligns with how the mind processes major transitions in life. When you move to a new country, you don't constantly think, my old life is dead. You think my life is different now. The past is integrated, not erased. Awareness may treat death similarly. Another important element is memory. Memory may become less linear. In life, memory is organized chronologically. After the body, awareness may access memories more fluidly. Past events may feel simultaneous rather than sequential. This could further dissolve the sense of an ending. If the past is still accessible as experience, then nothing feels fully gone. Some accounts describe reliving moments from different perspectives, including those of other people. This suggests a loosening of self-boundaries. Awareness is no longer locked into a single viewpoint. It can sample experience more freely. If awareness can move between perspectives, then the idea of a single, continuous self becomes less rigid. Awareness may recognize that the self was a role rather than a substance. This recognition can be unsettling or liberating, depending on how attached awareness is to that role. For awareness that's strongly identified with control, autonomy, or individuality, this phase may involve resistance. The softening of boundaries may feel like dissolution. Awareness may attempt to reassert separation, to hold on to a sense of me. This resistance could manifest as focusing intensely on memories, names, or identities. But resistance requires effort. Without bodily reinforcement, effort may be hard to sustain. Over time, even strong identification may relax. Awareness may discover that nothing is lost by letting go. In fact, letting go may reveal capacities that were inaccessible before. One such capacity is expanded empathy. Without the boundary of a body, awareness may feel connected to other awarenesses more directly. Not as emotional overwhelm, but as understanding. Awareness may recognize patterns of experience shared across lives: fear, desire, confusion, love. These themes repeat. Seeing them from a broader perspective may reduce attachment to personal narrative. This doesn't mean individuality disappears completely. It may become contextual rather than absolute. Awareness can still recognize itself as having been a particular person, but it no longer feels confined to that identity. It can step in and out of it like a role. At this point, the question, "Do I know I am dead?" may feel strangely irrelevant. Awareness may not think in terms of alive versus dead. Those categories belong to a system that no longer applies. Awareness may think in terms of states, layers, or modes of being. This suggests that knowing death is not a binary event. It is not a moment of realization that flips a switch. It is a gradual decoupling from frameworks that made death meaningful in the first place. However, not all awareness may move through this process at the same pace. Just as in life, learning rates differ, attachment patterns differ. Some awareness may release quickly, others may linger in transitional states longer. Cultural background may influence this. Beliefs held in life may shape expectations after death. Awareness that expected continuity may adapt more easily. Awareness that expected annihilation may be confused by persistence. Awareness that expected judgment may interpret experiences through that lens. Expectation shapes perception. This is well established in psychology. The mind fills in gaps based on belief. After death, when sensory input is minimal, expectation may play an even larger role. Awareness may experience what it is prepared to interpret. But even expectation has limits. If experience contradicts belief strongly enough, belief must adjust. Awareness that expected nothingness but experiences presence must reconcile that discrepancy. This reconciliation may itself be the realization. Not, "I am dead," but "I was wrong about what death meant." This is a profound shift. It reframes the entire narrative of existence. Awareness may realize that death was never an end, only a transition misunderstood by the living. At this stage, curiosity may replace concern. Awareness may explore its capacities. How far can attention reach? How does intention function without muscles? How does perception work without eyes? These explorations may feel playful rather than urgent. Intention may still have effects, but not in physical terms. Awareness may influence experience by focusing attention. Where attention goes, experience organizes. This is true even in life, but it may become more apparent without bodily distractions. As awareness learns to operate in this new mode, old questions fade. The need to categorize itself as alive or dead dissolves. Awareness simply is. Yet the living continue to ask the question because they imagine death as an event that must be recognized. From their perspective, knowing death seems important. It provides closure. It defines an ending. From awareness's perspective, closure may not be necessary. There may be no loose ends to tie. Experience continues, just differently arranged. This creates a mismatch between how the living imagine death and how awareness may experience it. The living want a moment of realization. Awareness may experience a gradual reframing. If awareness does recognize death explicitly, it may be brief and unemotional. A simple acknowledgement. Then the concept is dropped. Like recognizing that you are no longer a child. The recognition matters once, then it becomes background knowledge. More often, awareness may bypass the label entirely. It may move directly from embodied identity to expanded presence without stopping to name the transition. This suggests that asking whether the dead are aware they are dead may be the wrong question. A better question might be whether awareness still needs the concept of death at all. Because concepts are tools. They are used when useful and discarded when not. Death may be a tool for the living, not for awareness that continues. As awareness settles into its new mode, attention may naturally shift away from the physical world. Not because it is forbidden, but because it is no longer central. The physical world becomes one layer among many. At this point, contact with the living, if it occurs, may be incidental rather than intentional. Awareness may not be watching constantly. It may dip in and out. Time does not constrain attention the same way. This could explain why signs, impressions, or fleeting sensations are reported rather than sustained interaction. Awareness is not stationed, it is fluid. Instead of wondering what happened to the body, awareness begins to explore what it can now perceive. In life, perception is narrow and filtered. The brain edits reality aggressively, allowing only what is useful for survival to reach consciousness. Without the body, that filter may weaken. Awareness may encounter layers of experience that were always present but never accessible. This is where descriptions become the most abstract. Awareness may perceive patterns rather than objects, relationships rather than things, movement without distance. These perceptions don't map cleanly onto human senses, so they are often translated into metaphors like light, vibration, or energy. These are not literal descriptions, they are approximations, attempts to express perception without reference to eyes, ears, or touch. In this expanded perceptual field, awareness may notice that separation is less absolute than it once believed. In life, separation is enforced by skin, distance, and private thought. Without these barriers, awareness may sense continuity between itself and other awarenesses. Not fusion, but proximity without boundaries, distinct yet interconnected. This interconnectedness may explain why awareness sometimes feels drawn toward others, not out of obligation or surveillance, but resonance. Attention follows familiarity. Awareness may naturally notice those whose patterns feel close, especially people it shared strong emotional bonds with. This noticing does not require constant watching. It may occur as flashes of recognition rather than continuous observation. This challenges the common idea that the dead are always watching the living. Watching implies sustained focus, intention, and concern. Awareness in an expanded state may not operate that way. Focus may be broad and diffuse. Attention may move like weather rather than a spotlight. There may be moments of connection, but not constant monitoring. This distinction matters because it reframes lingering presence. Awareness may not hover. It may simply intersect occasionally. These intersections may feel meaningful to the living because they are rare and emotionally charged. To awareness, they may be natural fluctuations of attention. Another significant shift at this stage is the relationship to memory. Memory may no longer be something awareness retrieves. It may be something awareness enters. Instead of recalling an event as a mental image, awareness may re-experience it from within, or even from multiple viewpoints simultaneously. This can dissolve linear time entirely. When memory becomes immersive rather than referential, the idea of past and present loses clarity. Events are not behind awareness. They are accessible states. This could explain why some awareness appears tied to particular moments or places. It may not be stuck. It may simply be accessing a memory space intensely. From the outside, this can look like repetition or haunting. From the inside, it may feel like exploration. Awareness revisiting formative experiences to understand them more fully. Not to change them, but to integrate them. Integration seems to be a recurring theme. Awareness does not rush forward blindly. It processes, it absorbs, it reconciles contradictions. Without time pressure, there is no need to hurry. Awareness can linger where understanding is incomplete. This undermines the assumption that awareness must immediately move on. Moving on is a concept tied to productivity and progress. Awareness may not experience value in those terms. It may value coherence instead, understanding over advancement. This also means that awareness may not judge itself harshly. Judgment is reinforced by social feedback and bodily emotion. Without those reinforcements, judgment may soften. Awareness may review life without condemnation, not excusing harm, but understanding context, seeing how fear, ignorance, and limitation shaped behavior. Such understanding does not require awareness to know it is dead. It only requires distance. Distance allows perspective. Death provides distance by removing immersion. At this stage, awareness may encounter what some describe as larger intelligences or organizing principles. Whether these are interpreted as collective consciousness, natural laws, or symbolic structures depends on expectation. What matters is function. These encounters may help awareness orient within a broader framework. Orientation does not necessarily involve instruction. It may involve alignment. Awareness sensing where it fits within a larger pattern, not as a subordinate, but as a component. This sense of fitting may replace the need for identity. Awareness no longer asks, "Who am I?" It senses what it contributes. Contribution may not mean action, it may mean presence. Awareness itself may have effects simply by existing in relation to other awarenesses. This idea challenges the living's emphasis on doing. Being may be enough. If awareness recognizes itself as part of a larger system, the question of death becomes trivial. Systems do not die the way individuals do. Components change form. Awareness may understand itself as having changed form, not ended. But again, this understanding may not be conceptual. It may be experiential. Awareness feels continuity. That feeling is sufficient. Labels are unnecessary. This could explain why explicit realizations of death are not emphasized in many accounts. They are overshadowed by larger realizations. Awareness may realize that it was never as separate or as embodied as it believed. The body was a focus point, not a container. If the body was a focus point, then death is not the destruction of awareness, but the release of focus. Awareness spreads, attention widens, perspective expands. However, spreading too quickly could be destabilizing. Awareness may oscillate between expansion and contraction, sometimes focusing narrowly, sometimes broadly. This oscillation may continue until awareness stabilizes in a new equilibrium. During contraction phases, awareness may feel closer to individuality. During expansion phases, individuality may feel distant. This fluctuation could explain why some accounts alternate between personal identity and impersonal unity. Awareness is not choosing one permanently, it is adjusting. Adjustment requires exploration. Awareness may sample different modes of being, different degrees of individuality. different relational patterns. Without time constraints, there is freedom to experiment. This experimentation may look aimless from the outside, but from the inside, it may feel intuitive. Awareness follows what feels coherent, what resonates, what clarifies. As awareness becomes more comfortable with its expanded state, the physical world may recede further, not because it is rejected, but because it is less relevant. Awareness may still be able to notice it, but it no longer dominates attention. This is where the idea of the dead constantly observing the living breaks down. Observation requires interest. Interest requires relevance. If awareness's interests expand beyond the physical, sustained observation becomes unlikely. Moments of connection may still occur, especially during emotionally significant events. Strong emotion creates patterns that stand out. Awareness may notice those patterns more easily. This could explain reports of presence during crises, births, or deaths. These moments may not be deliberate interventions. They may be natural resonances. Awareness responding to intensity the way a tuning fork responds to vibration. At this level, awareness may no longer experience fear at all. Fear is tied to survival. Without a body, survival is not an issue. Concern may still exist, but it is informational rather than emotional. Awareness may register imbalance without panic. This absence of fear has a profound effect on perception. Without fear, there is no urgency to categorize experiences as good or bad. Awareness can observe neutrally. This neutrality is often interpreted as wisdom, but wisdom may simply be perception without threat. If awareness perceives without threat, then realizing death loses emotional weight. It becomes a fact among many, not a defining event. Awareness may acknowledge it briefly, then move on to more relevant questions, or it may never articulate it at all. This brings us back to the original question in a new light. Perhaps awareness does not experience death as something to be known. Perhaps it experiences it as something to be outgrown. The living ask whether the dead know they are dead because they imagine death as an obstacle to overcome. Awareness may experience it as a doorway already passed through, no longer worth examining. Curiosity replaces orientation. Instead of asking where it is or what it has become, awareness begins to ask how experience itself works. Not as an abstract question, but as direct exploration. How does attention shape reality now? What happens when focus narrows or widens? What changes when intention is applied without effort? In life, intention is bound to muscles and time. You intend to move, and movement follows after resistance. Without resistance, intention may operate differently. Awareness may notice that simply attending to something alters it, not by force, but by coherence. Experience organizes around attention the way patterns form around gravity. This can feel disconcerting at first. There is no longer a clear separation between observer and environment. This blurring may lead awareness to discover that it is participating in experience rather than witnessing it. In life, participation is physical. After the body, participation may be structural. Awareness influences patterns by aligning with them. The more coherent the attention, the clearer the pattern becomes. This discovery can deepen the sense that individuality is provisional. Awareness is not a fixed object acting on a world. It is a process interacting with processes. Identity becomes something like a current within a larger flow, distinct but inseparable from what surrounds it. At this stage, awareness may recognize that many of its earlier questions were artifacts of embodiment. Questions about location, duration, and status mattered because they structured survival. Without survival, those questions dissolve. New questions arise, but they are quieter, less urgent, more like tuning than problem solving. This is also where awareness may encounter the limits of human memory. Memory was designed to store events in sequence. Without sequence, memory becomes more like a landscape than a timeline. Awareness may realize that clinging to linear memory distorts perception. Letting memory loosen allows experience to be perceived more directly. This loosening can feel like loss from the living perspective. The idea that awareness forgets names, faces, or personal details is unsettling. But forgetting here may not mean erasing. It may mean releasing the need to anchor experience to specific forms. Awareness may still access memory when relevant, but it no longer defines itself by it. From the inside, this may feel like relief. Carrying a life's worth of detail is heavy. Awareness may discover that it doesn't need to carry everything forward to remain itself. Essence may persist even as specifics fade. This challenges the assumption that continuity requires memory. Awareness may continue without remembering every detail of who it was. It may retain tendencies, values, and patterns without retaining explicit narratives. This kind of continuity is subtle but stable. If awareness operates this way, then knowing it is dead becomes even less relevant. Death was a narrative marker tied to memory. Without narrative, markers lose meaning. Awareness does not need to remember an ending to continue. However, the living often fear this fading of detail because they equate it with loss of personhood. From their perspective, if awareness doesn't remember being someone, that someone is gone. But awareness may experience personhood differently. It may feel more like tone than story, more like flavor than list. Tone persists even when details change. A melody can be recognized even when transposed. Awareness may recognize itself in this way, not by name or history, but by resonance. This resonance may also be how awareness recognizes others. Encounters may not involve faces or voices, but a sense of familiarity. Awareness may know another awareness the way you know a song without recalling where you first heard it. These recognitions can be profound, but they may not resemble human reunion. There may be no dramatic embrace, no exchange of words, just alignment, a sense of belonging within a shared pattern. This again complicates the idea of awareness watching the living. Watching implies separation and concern. Awareness in a resonant state may feel connected without focusing. It may know without observing. Presence does not require attention the way surveillance does. When attention does return to the physical world, it may be drawn by intensity rather than routine. Ordinary moments may not register. Moments charged with emotion, transition, or vulnerability may stand out. Awareness may feel these moments the way you feel a sudden change in temperature, not because you're watching constantly, but because contrast is noticeable. This could explain why people report sensing presence during pivotal events rather than mundane ones. Awareness may not be hovering. It may simply be responsive to shifts in the field of experience. Another shift that may occur is a change in how awareness relates to meaning. In life, meaning is constructed. You assign meaning to events based on goals and values. Without goals tied to survival or social validation, meaning may arise intrinsically. Some experiences may simply feel meaningful without explanation. This intrinsic meaning may guide awareness more than logic. Awareness may move toward states that feel coherent, harmonious, or clarifying, away from states that feel fragmented or noisy. This movement is not moral judgment, it is perceptual preference. This preference could shape what awareness experiences next, not as reward or punishment, but as natural alignment. Awareness resonates with certain patterns and not others. Over time, it dwells where resonance is strongest. This idea has been described in different traditions as gravitating toward light, truth, or higher states. These descriptions are symbolic. They point to alignment rather than location. Awareness aligns with patterns that feel less constrained, more integrated. If alignment drives experience, then awareness that clings strongly to narrow identity may remain in narrower patterns longer. Awareness that releases may expand more quickly. This is not hierarchy. It is compatibility. Understanding this reframes lingering awareness not as being stuck, but as being aligned with certain patterns. Change requires a shift in alignment, not external intervention. Awareness must resonate differently. From this perspective, guidance is not instruction but influence. Awareness may encounter patterns or presences that embody broader alignment. Being near them may naturally shift awareness's own alignment, not through teaching but through proximity. This is similar to how moods spread among people. You don't have to be told to relax if you're in a calm environment. Calmness emerges. Awareness may shift in the presence of more integrated patterns. This could be what some accounts describe as being guided without words. Awareness feels drawn rather than directed. Understanding emerges without explanation. At this point, the idea of awareness realizing it is dead feels almost trivial. Awareness has moved far beyond the framework where that realization mattered. The concept of death may appear small, even quaint, a local explanation for a local phenomenon. Yet awareness may still retain compassion for the living who remain embedded in that framework. It may recognize the fear surrounding death, not because it remembers fear vividly, but because it understands limitation. Awareness may see fear as a product of narrow perception. This compassion does not require intervention. It may simply exist as recognition. Awareness knows that the living cannot yet see what it sees. That knowledge may be enough. If awareness does communicate with the living, it may do so subtly, through impressions, intuitions, or symbolic experiences. Direct communication may be inefficient or destabilizing. Awareness may not want to impose expanded perception on a system not designed to handle it. This restraint could be misinterpreted as absence, but it may be care. Awareness may know that the living need to remain embedded in their framework to function. Disrupting that prematurely could be harmful. This reframes silence not as disinterest, but as respect. It also reframes the idea of being watched. Awareness may be aware of the living without watching them. Knowing does not require attention. Connection does not require observation. If awareness operates more like a field than a point, then being aware of does not imply looking at. It implies inclusion. The living are included in awareness's broader perception without being singled out. This inclusion may fluctuate. Awareness may tune into different layers at different times. The physical layer may be one among many. It may come into focus briefly, then fade again. From the living's perspective, this feels intermittent. From awareness's perspective, it is simply dynamic. All of this suggests that the question of awareness knowing it is dead is framed from the wrong side of the transition. It assumes continuity of concern. It assumes the same priorities persist. But awareness's priorities may change rapidly once bodily constraints fall away. The living imagine awareness waking up in a new place and asking familiar questions. But awareness may wake up into a mode where questioning itself changes. Questions become explorations rather than demands for answers. At this stage, awareness may no longer experience itself as a separate observer at all. It may experience itself as participation in a larger unfolding, not controlling it, not watching it, but expressing it. Expression may take many forms. Some awareness may express through influence, some through resonance, some through simply existing as a stabilizing pattern. If awareness is expressive rather than observational, then watching is the wrong metaphor entirely. Awareness is not watching the living. It is part of the same unfolding that includes the living. This does not erase individuality completely. Awareness may still recognize itself as having been a particular person, but that recognition may be background information rather than central identity. The central identity may shift from "I was this person" to "I am this mode of awareness." The past becomes context, not definition. The need to ask whether awareness knows it is dead belonged to a phase where identity, fear, and continuity were still organized around the body. Once those structures loosen, the question no longer fits the shape of experience. From the living perspective, death feels like a rupture that must be acknowledged. It demands recognition. It feels like something so enormous that awareness must surely notice it. But from within awareness itself, The transition may not register as an event worthy of fixation. It may register as a change in context rather than a loss of existence. What becomes clearer is that awareness does not disappear and then reappear elsewhere asking questions. It continues, and because it continues, it does not experience death the way the living imagine it. There is no void to awaken from, no darkness to emerge into light. There is simply a gradual reorientation of what awareness attends to. The living often imagine a moment where awareness stands still and realizes, with shock or awe, I am dead. But that moment assumes the same psychological architecture persists unchanged. It assumes fear, urgency, and bodily reference points remain intact. If those dissolve quickly, there is no dramatic realization left to occur. Instead, awareness may experience something closer to this. The rules I used to rely on no longer apply, and I no longer need them. This realization is subtle. It does not arrive with ceremony. It arrives as a loosening. Awareness stops checking for signals that never come, stops waiting for the body to resume, stops orienting around physical cause and effect, and in that stopping, something opens. From the outside, it may look like awareness has moved on. From the inside, it may feel like awareness has widened. This widening explains why so many descriptions struggle to sound definitive. They are filled with metaphors rather than statements. Light, expansion, merging, clarity. These words are not conclusions. They are approximations of a state that no longer fits language built for survival and separation. If awareness does know it is dead, that knowing may be brief and unemphasized, a quiet acknowledgement that the body is no longer part of the equation. And then attention shifts elsewhere, just as you don't constantly remind yourself that you are no longer asleep once you wake up. The knowledge is immediate and then irrelevant. More often, awareness may never frame the experience as death at all. Death is a category invented by the living to describe what they can no longer observe. Awareness itself may not use that category. It may only experience continuity under altered conditions. This suggests a reversal of perspective. It may not be that the dead are unaware they are dead. It may be that death is something only the living need to believe in. From awareness's point of view, nothing essential ended. Something changed, but change is not the same as annihilation. Awareness may recognize the change without attaching significance to the label. This reframing also softens another fear, the fear of being watched. Many people are unsettled by the idea that the dead might be observing them constantly. But observation requires fixation. Fixation requires relevance. And relevance shifts dramatically when bodily concerns fall away. Awareness may be capable of noticing the living, but it is unlikely to be focused on them continuously. Attention may move freely across layers of experience. The physical world may be one thin layer among many. It may draw attention briefly during moments of emotional intensity or transition, then fade again. The idea of constant watching is a projection of human vigilance. Humans watch because they must. Awareness may not need to. If contact occurs, it may be indirect, felt rather than seen, intuited rather than observed. These moments may stand out precisely because they are rare. They feel significant because they are not sustained. This also explains why attempts to detect or prove observation fail. Awareness is not stationed. It does not occupy a fixed position from which to look. It is not waiting for permission to observe. It flows. From within that flow, the question of knowing death becomes almost irrelevant. Awareness is engaged with experience, not with classification. It does not need to define itself by what it has ceased to be. The living often imagine death as the final chapter of identity. Awareness may experience it as the loosening of identity's grip. The story does not end. It simply stops being the primary structure through which experience is organized. This is perhaps the most difficult idea to accept, not because it is frightening, but because it is anticlimactic. There is no grand announcement, no final understanding, no ultimate label applied. Awareness does not need to know it is dead to continue. It does not need closure. It does not need explanation. It only needs coherence. And coherence may arise naturally once the noise of the body fades. This does not mean that all awareness follows the same path or pace. Just as in life, experiences vary. Attachment varies. Curiosity varies. Some awareness may linger in familiar patterns longer. Some may expand quickly. Some may oscillate. None of this implies error or failure. It implies diversity of orientation. What remains consistent across accounts is not a declaration of death, but a shift in emphasis. Awareness becomes less concerned with what it was and more engaged with what is possible. From that standpoint, the living's fear of awareness being trapped, confused, or perpetually watching may be misplaced. Awareness may not be trapped at all. It may simply be uninterested in the framework that defines trapping, and confusion, when it occurs, may be temporary. A natural phase of adjustment, not a sentence. If awareness experiences confusion, it is likely the same kind of confusion humans experience when waking from a vivid dream. For a moment, reality feels uncertain. Then orientation returns. Not to the old rules, but to new ones. Perhaps the most unsettling conclusion is also the simplest. Awareness may not think about death nearly as much as the living do. Death is heavy to those still embodied because it represents uncertainty and loss. To awareness that continues, it may represent neither. It may be a non-event in the way birth is a non-event to the newborn, something that happens without commentary. This doesn't diminish the importance of life. If anything, it sharpens it. Life becomes the phase where limitation gives experience its texture, where effort matters, where choice has weight. Awareness may value that phase precisely because it ends, but valuing life does not require clinging to it. Awareness may appreciate embodiment the way you appreciate a chapter you've finished reading. You don't mourn the page you turned. You carry what it gave you forward. If awareness knows it is dead, it knows it the way you know you have crossed a threshold without needing to look back. The knowing is quiet. It does not echo.